Welcome back to the Daily Factor. Let's go to our world updates. And of course, every Friday we take a look at a wrap of the African stories from this week. And I'd like to welcome the digital editor of The Conversation Africa, OZAYR Patel. OZAYR, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And Jazakallah again for joining us.
Walaikum salam. Jazakallah for having me, for us.
No, it's an absolute pleasure.
Always a pleasure.
No, it's an absolute pleasure also from my side. OZAYR, we have to start off, of course, one place, and that is, of course, in Zambia. The death of former Zambian President Dr. Kenneth Kaunda. When we speak about an icon, when we speak about a giant, and we speak about a great liberator, Kenneth Kaunda is definitely one that comes to mind.
Definitely. The sad news came out of Zambia yesterday. There was an official post from the Zambian president on Facebook that confirmed the death. And Kenneth Kaunda was 97 years old, and he was definitely one of the giants of African nationalism. He's one of the few big men or big leaders, or so they call, on the continent who actually left with his reputation still intact. And he was widely known for his work with revolutions and help basically letting Zambia be a place, a haven for revolutions and for leaders of all sorts.
Yeah, and OZAYR, you know, to touch on it, I mean, the ANC, I mean, of course, they released a statement, but when we talk about the liberation right here in South Africa, I mean, Zambia played such a huge role. Of course, a number of controversies where soldiers went to Zambia and, of course, trained under the leadership of Kenneth Kaunda.
Definitely. As he was affectionately known, KK played a huge role in South Africa's liberation. Not only that, but he was also involved in allowing 120 white South Africans to a conference in Zambia and banned members of the ANC, and they were fighting for liberation for black South Africans. And he always shed tears when he met these types of people and was often known for his tears in public, but he was one of those who had defiant opposition to the apartheid regime.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely one of those that, I mean, when you see the pictures, you see him with the likes of Thabo Mbeki, the late Nelson Mandela, the late Dr. Walter Sisulu, Oliver Tambo, the late Oliver Tambo. I mean, this man, he stands amongst the giants of Africa. There's so many names of African liberators, you know, the likes of the late Muammar Gaddafi, our late President Nelson Mandela. I mean, surely he does rank among the great African leaders, the great liberators, and somebody that has to be respected.
Definitely, definitely. He had a rich life as a president. He was in charge for something like 27 years. He led, after colonialization, he led Zambia to a one-party state. And he then chose, eventually, once he realized that his population is waning, he decided that it's time to bow out with grace. And he held elections and he lost elections. The country was going through turmoil economically and he just couldn't maintain it. And as you know, it's really tough for African leaders to cede power in a peaceful fashion without any sort of coup or any violence. And I think he was mostly lauded for that. And he was really quite popular for his dealings with other countries, his policies, his stance. He played a huge role in setting up the AU, which is the African Union. He was quite popular for meeting with presidents like Saddam Hussein. He was really adored by President Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan, former presidents of US. His dealings with China. He was just a well-known, well-loved African leader. And I think he left a huge legacy on the continent, and his presence will surely be felt for many years.
Yeah, one of the last few giants, of course, 2 years ago, Robert Mugabe, one of those liberators, of course, who took back power from the British, died 2019. Let's stay, OZAYR, in the southern part of our continent, in Malawi, a huge reform decision that has come.
Yes, so Malawi has abolished the death penalty. It's actually interesting. Malawi's constitutional court found that the death penalty was unconstitutional, and it's really confusing because there was years of confusion. So over 15 years ago, the death penalty was abolished for murder. But then they found there was an automatic death sentence which didn't sufficiently individualize sentencing, and it was seen as a cruel and degrading punishment. But since then, there was a lot of gray area, and there were 37 prisoners who were on death row, and there was just a bit of imbalance, and no one knew exactly what the law meant. But anyway, in any case, a man named Charles Koviwa, a death row inmate, um, basically brought the thing to court. And after that, Malawi have now ruled that the death penalty is unconstitutional. So it's interesting because on one hand, they say that everyone has a right to live. On the other hand, they also say that people have a right to be sentenced to death. And now they've basically ruled that the death penalty infringes on the right to live more so than it does on people's right to be punished by death. And that's why they've basically abolished that rule, and the death penalty is now no longer available in Malawi. But it's interesting because on the Southern African region, there are still countries that have the death penalty. So that's and the right to live, the provision in the constitution, it is also related, and it does provide for the death penalty, and that's Botswana, Eswatini, and Zambia. But in countries like South Africa, Mozambique, and Namibia, the right to live is stronger, and the death penalty is abolished there. So it's really quite an interesting case, and it may just lead to neighbors saying, okay, look, if Malawi are now abolishing it, maybe we should too.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see the ripple effect that comes from that, OZAYR. We then go to the eastern part of the continent, and the crisis in Tigray just continues to spiral out of control. What is the update there from that part of our continent?
So, like you're saying, it's spiraling. There's massive fear that famine will soon hit the Tigray region. The war is ongoing. Lives are being lost. There's reports of rapes on the ground and a lot of suffering happening in the region. And people are calling for a ceasefire and dialogue. But a little glimmer of hope is that there are elections set for Ethiopia on Monday, where many people are supposed to go to the polls. But after two postponements due to COVID-19 and then logistical challenges, we hope that it won't be delayed again. As you know, the delay that happened in November 2020 caused some of the conflict, which led to some of the sparking and the reason for the instability. But yeah, the situation is quite tense, and the hope that the election will take place will basically bring some sort of stability, to bring a government that can be just discussed and call a ceasefire and dialogue be held so that some sort of democracy can take place and that aid can go to the people suffering in Tigray.
OZAYR Patel, and of course, agree with you. We just hope that peace will be able to come in that part of the region, and famine and poverty and all of that can be eradicated. It will take time, but we hope for that to happen. And it's, of course, up to the AU and, of course, the UN to play their role with regards to that. OZAYR Patel, digital editor at The Conversation Africa, we say Jazakallah to you, and inshallah we'll see you again next week on the same time.
Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. There we go, OZAYR Patel, just giving us a wrap of some of the African stories that have happened this week. Well, after the break, it will be our community news, and every Friday, of course, we bring ulama to go ahead and give us a Friday nasiha between Asr and Maghrib, so do stay tuned.